Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched the construction robots place another atmospheric processor. The metal machine hummed to life, adding to the dozens already working across the frozen planet of Cathera Prime. Ice covered everything here, but slowly, these machines would make the air breathable for humans and other species. The construction site buzzed with activity. Marcus watched his crew work together. There were humans in thick winter gear, tall blue-skinned Altarians who loved the cold, and the native Lyranth workers. The Lyranth looked like giant wolves that walked on two legs. Their fur sparkled like crystals in the pale sunlight. Marcus had been the foreman here for 3 years. He knew this job was important. If they could make Cathera Prime livable, millions of beings could call it home. But the work was dangerous. The weather here could kill you in minutes if you were not careful. His communication device beeped. "Marcus, this is Control Base. We have a problem." Marcus picked up the device. "What's wrong, Sarah?" Sarah's voice sounded worried. "The weather satellites are showing a massive ice storm coming. It's bigger than anything we've seen before. Wind speeds over 300 kilometers per hour. Temperature will drop to minus 200 degrees. Marcus looked at the sky. It was getting darker. "How long do we have?" 6 hours, maybe less. You need to evacuate everyone now." Marcus switched his radio to the crew frequency. "All workers, listen up. Big storm coming. Everyone to the underground shelters. Move fast, but stay safe." The construction site became chaos. Workers dropped their tools and ran toward the shelter entrances. The Altarians helped load equipment onto hover trucks. The human workers secured the valuable machinery. Marcus watched the Lyranth workers. They moved differently than the others. Their leader, a huge male named Greth, gathered his people quickly. They communicated in their own language, a mix of growls and clicks that Marcus could not understand. "Greth," Marcus called out, "your people need to get to shelter too." Greth's yellow eyes met Marcus's. "We go to deep caves. Lyranth ways are better for big storms." Marcus nodded. He trusted the native knowledge. The Lyranth had survived on this planet for thousands of years. They knew how to handle the weather. As the workers disappeared into their shelters, Marcus did one final check of the construction site. He looked at his scanner, making sure all life signs were accounted for. The device showed green dots for each worker safely in the shelters. But something was wrong. 2 red dots blinked on his screen. They were not moving. The location showed the old Lyranth settlement about 2 kilometers away. That place had been empty for weeks since the workers moved closer to the human base. Marcus tried his radio. "Control, I've got 2 life signs at the old settlement. Looks like someone got left behind." Sarah's voice crackled through the static. "The storm's moving faster than expected. You have maybe 2 hours now. We can't send a rescue team." Marcus looked at the darkening sky. Snow was already starting to fall. The wind was getting stronger. He knew the rules. In a storm like this, you stayed in the shelter. Going out was suicide. But those 2 red dots were not moving. Someone was trapped out there. Marcus made his decision. He ran to the equipment shed and found the emergency thermal suit. It was designed for short-term exposure to extreme cold. The suit could keep someone alive for maybe 4 hours in the worst conditions. As he put on the suit, other workers saw him. "Marcus, what are you doing?" asked Jennifer, one of his engineers. 2 life signs at the old settlement. Can't leave them." "That's crazy. The storm will kill you." Marcus sealed his helmet and checked the suit's systems. Everything was green. "Maybe, but I can't sit here knowing someone needs help." He climbed onto a snow speeder and started the engine. The vehicle was built for ice travel, but not for the storm that was coming. Marcus set the navigation for the old Lyranth settlement and drove into the growing blizzard. The wind hit him like a wall. Even with the thermal suit, he could feel the cold trying to get in. The snow was so thick he could barely see the navigation display. The speeder slipped and slid on the ice, but Marcus kept going. 20 minutes into the journey, the speeder's engines started to struggle. Ice was forming on the intake vents. Marcus stopped and cleared them with his gloved hands. The cold bit through his gloves in seconds. Finally, he reached the settlement. The Lyranth had built their homes into the sides of ice cliffs. Most were empty now, dark holes in the white landscape. Marcus checked his scanner again. The 2 life signs were coming from a collapsed den at the edge of the settlement. Marcus approached carefully. Part of the cliff had fallen down, blocking the entrance to the den. He could hear something inside. It sounded like crying, but not human crying. It was higher pitched, more like whimpering. Using his tools, Marcus began digging through the ice and rock. His thermal suit's heater was working hard to keep him warm, but he could feel the cold seeping in. The storm was getting worse every minute. After 30 minutes of digging, Marcus made a hole big enough to crawl through. He turned on his helmet light and looked inside. What he saw made his heart stop. 2 tiny Lyranth cubs huddled together in the back of the den. They were so young their eyes were barely open. Their crystal fur was dull and gray instead of bright and shining. They were dying from the cold. The cubs looked up at Marcus with frightened eyes. They had never seen a human before, but they were too weak to run. Marcus knew he had to act fast. The storm was here. Marcus crawled into the den and reached for the cubs. They were so cold they barely moved when he touched them. Their breathing was slow and weak. Even with their thick crystal fur, the freezing air was killing them. He checked his suit's temperature readings. Outside, the storm had dropped the temperature to minus 150 degrees. Inside the den, it was still minus 90. The cubs needed warmth, and they needed it now. Marcus made a decision that went against all safety rules. He opened his thermal suit and pulled the cubs against his chest. Human body temperature was much higher than most alien species. His skin felt burning hot to the freezing cubs. The cubs whimpered and tried to move away from the heat at first, but their survival instincts kicked in. They pressed closer to Marcus, seeking the warmth that could save their lives. Marcus sealed his suit back up with the cubs inside. It was tight, and the suit's heating system was not designed for 3 bodies. Warning lights blinked on his display. The thermal unit was working too hard. "Come on, little ones," Marcus whispered. "We're getting out of here." He crawled back out of the den into the full fury of the storm. The wind hit him so hard it knocked him to his knees. Snow whipped around him like tiny ice bullets. His speeder was already half buried in snow. Marcus dug the vehicle out and started the engine. It coughed and sputtered but finally came to life. He set course for the base, but the navigation system was having trouble with all the interference from the storm. The journey back became a nightmare. Marcus could barely see 5 meters ahead. Several times he had to stop and check the navigation manually. The cubs moved against his chest, still alive but growing weaker. Halfway back, disaster struck. Marcus drove over what looked like solid ice, but it was actually a thin layer covering a deep crack. The speeder crashed through and fell 3 meters down into a hidden ravine. Marcus groaned as he pulled himself from the wreckage. His left arm hurt badly. The speeder was totaled, its engines smoking in the snow. He was now 8 kilometers from base in the worst storm in the planet's recorded history. But the cubs were still alive. He could feel them breathing against his skin. Marcus activated his emergency beacon and started walking. Each step was a battle against the wind and ice. The storm was so loud he could not hear his own breathing. Snow filled every gap in his suit, and ice formed on his visor. After an hour of walking, Marcus realized he was lost. The storm had confused his navigation system. He could be walking in circles or heading away from the base. His suit's power was down to 60%. The cubs sensed his distress. Something strange began to happen. Their crystal fur started to glow with a faint blue light. The light was warm, and Marcus felt heat spreading through his chest where the cubs pressed against him. Marcus had heard about this ability, but never seen it. When Lyranth were in extreme danger, their fur could conduct and share thermal energy. The cubs were trying to keep him warm, even though they were still freezing themselves. The shared warmth created a feedback loop. Marcus's body heat warmed the cubs, and their thermal fur spread that heat back through his body. It was barely enough to keep them all alive, but it was working. Marcus kept walking. His feet went numb first, then his hands. Ice formed inside his helmet, making it hard to see, but he kept moving forward, following the weak signal from his emergency beacon. Hours passed. Marcus fell down many times. Each time he struggled back to his feet and kept going. The cubs had stopped whimpering. They were very still, but he could still feel their heartbeats. His suit's power dropped to 30%, then 20%. The heating system began to fail. Warning alarms sounded in his helmet, but Marcus ignored them. He focused on putting one foot in front of the other. When the power hit 10%, Marcus knew he was in serious trouble. His vision was getting blurry. His thoughts were becoming confused. These were signs of severe hypothermia. If rescue did not find him soon, all three of them would die. Marcus stumbled and fell face first into the snow. This time, getting up seemed impossible. His muscles would not respond properly. The cold was winning. But then he felt movement against his chest. One of the cubs was trying to lift its head. It made a small sound, like a kitten mewing. The sound gave Marcus strength he did not know he had. He forced himself to stand up. The emergency beacon in his hand showed a green light. That meant rescue teams could track his signal, but they had to be looking for him. Marcus managed a few more steps before collapsing again. This time, he could not get up. He lay in the snow, holding the cubs close to his body. His suit's power was almost gone. The cubs' thermal fur glowed brighter. They were using the last of their energy to keep him warm. These tiny creatures, barely weeks old, were trying to save the human who had saved them. Marcus closed his eyes. He had done everything he could. If rescue came, all three of them might live. If not, at least he had tried. Through the howling wind, Marcus thought he heard something. It sounded like engines. But it might have been his imagination. The cold played tricks on your mind. The sound grew louder. Lights appeared through the snow. Marcus tried to signal with his emergency beacon, but his hands would not move. Strong hands grabbed him and pulled him from the snow. He heard voices shouting over the storm. Someone was checking his vital signs. Other people were working to extract the cubs from his thermal suit. "He's alive, but barely," someone said. "Core temperature is way too low, and there are 2 Lyranth cubs in here with him." "Are they alive?" "Yes, but not by much. This human saved their lives with his own body heat." Marcus felt himself being lifted onto a stretcher. The last thing he remembered before losing consciousness was seeing the cubs being wrapped in emergency thermal blankets. Their crystal fur was still glowing faintly blue. He had done it. They were all going to live. Marcus woke up in the medical center 3 days later. His body felt like he had been hit by a construction vehicle. Bandages covered his frostbitten hands, and his left arm was in a cast. But he was alive. "You're awake," said Dr. Lisa Park, the base's chief medical officer. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been frozen and thawed out," Marcus said with a weak smile. "The cubs, are they okay?" Dr. Park nodded. "They're alive because of you. But Marcus, what you did was incredibly dangerous. You could have died out there." "Had to try," Marcus said. "Couldn't leave them." News of the rescue had spread quickly. Marcus's communicator was full of messages from friends, family, and news reporters. The story had reached Earth and other human colonies. People were calling him a hero. But Marcus did not feel like a hero. He had just done what felt right. The cubs were in a special care unit down the hall. Dr. Park led Marcus there in a wheelchair. Through the observation window, he could see the two small Lyranth sleeping in heated beds. Their crystal fur was bright and healthy now. "They've been asking for you," Dr. Park said. "Asking? They can't talk yet, can they?" "Not with words. But they've been making distress calls whenever you're not nearby. It's like they know you're their rescuer." As if they sensed his presence, both cubs opened their eyes and looked directly at Marcus through the window. They made small chirping sounds and tried to reach toward him. "Can I see them?" Dr. Park hesitated. "There's something you should know first. The Lyranth pack leaders want to meet with you." An hour later, Marcus sat in the base's main conference room. Greth, the pack leader, stood across from him with 3 other adult Lyranth. Their expressions were hard to read, but Marcus sensed tension in the room. "Marcus Chen," Greth said in his deep, rumbling voice, "you saved Frost and Crystal." "Frost and Crystal? The cubs. We have named them for their survival in the ice storm. But there is a problem." Greth explained that the cubs had imprinted on Marcus during their time of extreme danger. It was a biological process that happened when young Lyranth faced death. Their brains formed a permanent bond with whoever saved them. "They think you are their pack father now," Greth said. "This has never happened between different species before." "I can return them to their real parents," Marcus offered. "Their parents died in the storm," another Lyranth said sadly. "They were trying to rescue the cubs when an ice cliff collapsed. That is why the cubs were alone." Marcus felt sick. The cubs were orphans, and now they had bonded with him instead of their own species. "What does this mean?" Marcus asked. "We do not know," Greth admitted. "Lyranth young stay with their pack father for 2 years. They learn our ways, our language, our customs. But you are human." "Maybe they can learn both ways," Marcus suggested. "Human and Lyranth." The pack leaders exchanged glances. This was clearly not a normal situation for them either. Over the next few weeks, Marcus spent time with Frost and Crystal every day. The cubs grew quickly. They learned to walk properly and started eating solid food. But they only stayed calm when Marcus was near. If Marcus left the room, they would cry and refuse to eat. If other Lyranth tried to care for them, the cubs became aggressive and tried to hide. The situation attracted attention from the Galactic Species Council. Representatives arrived from different worlds to study this unusual interspecies bonding. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a xenobiologist from Earth, ran tests on both Marcus and the cubs. "The neural pathways are remarkable," she explained. "The cub's brain chemistry has actually adapted to recognize human emotional signals, and Marcus, your stress hormones react to their distress calls just like a biological parent." "Is it permanent?" Marcus asked. "We think so. The bonds formed during extreme trauma are usually lifelong in Lyranth biology." Meanwhile, news media from across the galaxy had picked up the story. Reports called Marcus the human who speaks wolf and the ice storm hero. Camera crews wanted to interview him and film the cubs. Marcus hated the attention. He just wanted to do his job and help Frost and Crystal grow up healthy. But every day brought new reporters and scientists wanting to study their unique family. The cubs, now the size of large dogs, followed Marcus everywhere. They had learned to understand simple human words and responded to their names. Their intelligence was obvious. They watched Marcus work and tried to copy his actions. One day Marcus was reviewing construction plans when Crystal picked up a stylus in her mouth and tried to draw on the tablet. Frost discovered how to operate the lights by touching the wall panels with his paw. "They're learning human technology," Dr. Park observed. "No one has ever seen Lyranth do that before." Greth visited regularly to check on the cubs. He was amazed by their development. "They are still Lyranth," he said, "but also something new." The pack leaders finally made a decision. They would allow Marcus to raise Frost and Crystal, but with conditions. The cubs must also learn Lyranth traditions and language. They must understand their own species' history and culture. Marcus agreed immediately. He wanted the cubs to know where they came from, but other groups were not so accepting. Some humans thought it was unnatural for different species to form family bonds. Some Lyranth worried that the cubs were being corrupted by human influence. The Galactic Species Council scheduled formal hearings to decide if interspecies adoption should be allowed. Marcus would have to testify and defend his right to raise Frost and Crystal. "Are you ready for this?" Dr. Park asked as they prepared for the hearings. Marcus looked at Frost and Crystal, who were sleeping curled up next to his chair. In just a few months, they had become the most important things in his life. "I have to be," he said. "They're my cubs now." 6 months had passed since the rescue. Frost and Crystal were now the size of adult wolves, but they still acted like puppies around Marcus. Every morning, they would wake him up by gently nudging his face with their cold noses. They followed him to work and watched everything he did with bright, intelligent eyes. The cubs had learned dozens of human words and could understand complex instructions. When Marcus said tools, they would bring him his toolkit. When he said break time, they knew to find shade and rest. But they were still Lyranth. Their crystal fur could glow in the dark, and they could sense changes in weather hours before any instrument. They communicated with each other in their species' clicking language, which Marcus was slowly learning. The construction project had continued despite all the attention from the rescue. The atmospheric processors were working well, and the ice planet was slowly becoming more livable. But Marcus noticed that human and Lyranth workers cooperated better now. His rescue of the cubs had changed how the two species saw each other. Today was different, though. Today, Marcus had to testify before the Galactic Species Council via video link. Representatives from 12 different worlds would decide if interspecies adoption should be legal. Marcus wore his best formal clothes and sat in the base's communications center. Frost and Crystal lay at his feet, sensing his nervousness. The video screen showed a large chamber filled with beings from across the galaxy. "Mr. Chen," said the council leader, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms. "You claim the right to raise 2 Lyranth cubs as your own children. This goes against thousands of years of galactic law." "I don't claim anything," Marcus replied. "I just saved 2 babies who needed help. They bonded with me. I'm not going to abandon them now." A reptilian counselor spoke next. "Interspecies contamination is dangerous. These cubs may lose their natural instincts." "Have you watched them?" Marcus asked. "They're still completely Lyranth. They hunt, they play, they communicate with their own species, but they've also learned human skills that make them more capable." To prove his point, Marcus gestured to Crystal. She walked to a nearby control panel and operated it perfectly, adjusting the room's temperature. Then she returned and sat properly, her tail wagging. "Remarkable," admitted a counselor with tentacles for arms. "The fusion of capabilities is unprecedented." The hearing continued for hours. Some counselors worried that allowing interspecies families would lead to genetic confusion. Others argued that it showed evolution in action. During a break, Marcus received an emergency alert on his communicator. There had been an accident at Construction Site 7. A drilling machine had broken through into an underground cavern, and 3 workers were trapped. "I have to go," Marcus told the council. "My crew needs me." "The hearing is not finished," the council leader protested. "The hearing can wait." "People are in danger." Marcus rushed to the construction site with Frost and Crystal following. The situation was bad. The drilling machine had fallen into a cavern filled with unstable ice formations. 3 workers were alive but trapped under collapsed equipment. The rescue teams were having trouble reaching them because the cavern kept shifting. Every time they tried to dig, more ice fell down. "We can't get to them," said Jennifer, Marcus's chief engineer. "The whole structure is too unstable." Marcus studied the situation. Then he had an idea. He looked at Frost and Crystal, who were sniffing the air around the cave entrance. "You can sense the ice stability, can't you?" he asked them. The cubs tilted their heads, understanding his tone, if not all his words. Marcus pointed to different sections of the cave. "Safe? Dangerous?" Frost walked to one area and sat down, his fur glowing bright blue. Crystal went to another spot and lay down, her fur glowing steady green. They were showing him the safest path through the unstable cavern. "You trust them?" Jennifer asked. "With my life," Marcus replied. Using the cubs as guides, the rescue team found a safe route to the trapped workers. Frost and Crystal could sense tiny changes in ice density and temperature that human instruments missed. They led the rescuers through a path that avoided the most dangerous areas. The rescue took 4 hours, but all 3 workers were saved. As they emerged from the cavern, news cameras caught everything. The galaxy watched as 2 Lyranth cubs helped save human lives, working perfectly with their adopted father. Back at the council hearing the next day, the mood had changed. The rescue had been broadcast across the galaxy. People had seen Frost and Crystal's unique abilities in action. "Mr. Chen," said the council leader, "yesterday's rescue was extraordinary. Your cubs showed capabilities that neither species possesses alone." "They're not just my cubs anymore," Marcus said. "They're part of both worlds, human and Lyranth working together." A new voice joined the hearing. It was Greth, connecting from the Lyranth settlement. "The pack leaders have discussed this matter. We believe Frost and Crystal represent something new and good. They are still our cubs, but they are also Marcus's cubs. This is not contamination. This is evolution." The council voted that afternoon. By a margin of 8-4, they approved limited interspecies adoption rights. Families like Marcus's would be studied and monitored, but they would be legal. That evening, Marcus sat outside the base watching Cathara Prime's 3 moons rise over the ice fields. Frost and Crystal played nearby, chasing each other and practicing their hunting skills. Dr. Park joined him. "So what happens now?" Marcus smiled. "Now we finish terraforming this planet, and maybe we help a few more species learn to work together." Crystal brought him a stick she had found and dropped it at his feet, wanting to play fetch. Frost joined in, and soon all 3 of them were running around in the snow. Marcus realized that saving the cubs had changed more than just their lives. It had changed his own life, the relationship between humans and Lyranth, and maybe even the future of the galaxy. As they played, Marcus noticed something interesting. Other workers had come outside to watch them. Humans and Lyranth stood together, smiling at the unusual family. For the first time in galactic history, 2 species were truly learning to understand each other. And it all started with one human who refused to leave 2 helpless babies in a storm. 2 years had passed since the ice storm that changed everything. Marcus was now 53 years old, his hair grayer but his spirit stronger than ever. The terraforming of Cathara Prime was nearly complete. The once frozen world now had breathable air in many areas, and the first permanent cities were being built. Frost and Crystal had grown into magnificent adults. They stood as tall as Marcus at the shoulder, their crystal fur gleaming with health and intelligence. They had learned to speak both human languages and Lyranth dialects fluently. More importantly, they had become bridges between the 2 species. The success of the terraforming project was largely due to their unique abilities. Frost could sense underground water sources better than any human equipment. Crystal could predict weather patterns by feeling atmospheric pressure changes through her fur. Together, they had helped choose the best locations for new settlements. Marcus now held the title of Interspecies Coordinator for Cathara Prime. His job was to make sure humans and Lyranth worked together smoothly. It was work he had never expected to do, but it felt right. On this particular morning, Marcus was reviewing plans for the newest settlement when alarms began blaring throughout the base. His communicator crackled to life. "Emergency alert!" came Sarah's urgent voice. "We have massive seismic activity detected, underground volcanic event building up. We need to evacuate the whole planet." Marcus ran to the control center. The displays showed terrifying data. Deep beneath Cathera Prime's ice, volcanic chambers were heating up rapidly. When they erupted, they would release poison gas and superheated steam across the entire surface. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked. 12 hours. "Maybe less," Sarah replied. "We need to evacuate 50,000 people and all the equipment we can save." It was an impossible task. The evacuation ships could only carry 30,000 people at once. They would need at least 2 trips, but there was not enough time. Frost and Crystal appeared at Marcus's side. They had sensed the emergency and came running. Their fur was glowing with stress patterns that Marcus had learned to read. "The deep ice is angry," Crystal said in her mixture of human words and Lyranth clicks. "But there are safe places, cold caves where the heat cannot reach." Marcus looked at the geological survey data. "Are you talking about the old Lyranth shelter systems?" "Yes," Frost said. "Our people have used them for thousands of winters. They go very deep, protected from heat and poison." Marcus studied the maps. The Lyranth had built their civilization around these natural cave systems. If they could get people into the caves, they might survive the volcanic event. "Sarah, change of plans," Marcus said. "We're not evacuating everyone off-planet. We're going underground." The next few hours became the largest emergency operation in galactic history. Marcus coordinated evacuation efforts while Frost and Crystal worked with Lyranth pack leaders to map out the safe cave systems. The cubs had become natural leaders among both species. Humans trusted them because they were Marcus's family. Lyranth respected them because they understood the old ways. Crystal led teams of human engineers into the deepest caves, showing them how to set up life support systems. Frost guided supply convoys through ice passages that had never appeared on human maps. As the evacuation progressed, Marcus felt chest pains. The stress and years of hard work in harsh conditions were taking their toll. But he pushed through it. Too many people depended on him. With 3 hours left before the volcanic eruption, 90% of the population was safely underground. But Marcus collapsed while helping load the last supply convoy. "Dad!" Crystal cried, using the human word she had learned for father. She and Frost rushed to his side. Dr. Park arrived quickly. "It's his heart. The stress is too much. He needs immediate medical treatment." "The evacuation," Marcus started to say. "Is almost finished," Frost interrupted. "We know what to do. You taught us well." As medical teams worked on Marcus, Frost and Crystal took command of the final evacuation phase. They moved between human and Lyranth groups, translating languages and coordinating efforts with skills that neither species possessed alone. The volcanic eruption began just as the last person entered the cave systems. Superheated gas and steam covered the planet's surface, making it deadly for weeks. But everyone was safe in the deep caves, guided there by 2 remarkable cubs and their adopted father. Marcus spent a month recovering in the underground medical center. When he was finally strong enough to walk around, he found that the evacuation had created something unprecedented. Humans and Lyranth had lived together in the caves for weeks. They had shared food, told stories, and learned each other's languages. Children from both species played together. Scientists collaborated on projects. Engineers shared techniques. "It's like a whole new civilization down here," Dr. Park observed. When the surface finally became safe again, many people chose to stay in the expanded cave cities. They liked the cooperation they had built during the crisis. Marcus stood at the entrance to one of the new underground cities, watching families from different species work and play together. Frost and Crystal stood beside him, now wearing the insignia of official interspecies emergency coordinators. "We did something good here," Marcus said quietly. You did something good, Crystal corrected him. You showed us that family has nothing to do with species. A young human girl ran up to them, followed by a Lyranth cub about the same age. They were playing some kind of tag game that involved both running and pouncing. Mr. Marcus, the girl said, will you tell us the story about the ice storm again? Marcus smiled. I think I've told that story enough times. But it's the best story, the Lyranth cub clicked in perfect human language. As more children gathered around, Marcus realized his story had become legend. But the real story was still being written every day by humans, and Lyranth learning to live together. A message arrived on his communicator. It was from the Galactic Species Council. They were establishing the Interspecies Emergency Response Academy, and they wanted Marcus to be the first director. What do you think? He asked Frost and Crystal. We think, Frost said with a grin that showed his impressive teeth, that someone needs to teach other species how to be a proper family. Marcus laughed. At 53, he was starting a new career teaching others what he had learned from 2 orphaned cubs in an ice storm. Sometimes the best lessons came from the most unexpected teachers. As the 3 of them walked back into their underground city, Marcus felt proud of what they had built together. One act of compassion had grown into something that would change the galaxy forever. Behind them, human and Lyranth families headed home together, their children playing and laughing in languages that mixed both species' words. It was the sound of the future, the